One of the principles of the pillars process is that the guides should be really useful to local groups. This usually means that the guides need to be translated so they are available in the local language. An organization working with a number of local groups may take on the work of providing translations. Quality, accuracy, and relevance are very important. It takes a lot of work to translate, check, and print a guide so it can be used widely. However, if the translation is poor or full of mistakes, then people will be put off using it. Tearfund have a checklist for good translation work. Don't translate word for word. Instead, translate whole sentences and phrases. Keep the text as short as possible. Never write to impress others. Use clear, straightforward words, avoiding technical terms. Check that spelling and punctuation are correct. Make the guides easy to use with short, interesting titles and clear labels for the diagrams. Check the illustrations and diagrams are appropriate for the culture. You may need new ones. Translation can also be done during a pillars workshop. Participants should include typical representatives of groups that will use the translated guide. Not everyone has to be literate. Translating during a workshop means that participants can contribute to the understanding and the quality of the translated guides. The workshop helps people to understand how to create effective translations, not just translating word for word, but making sure the meaning is shared clearly and well in the local language. All participants will have something to contribute to the understanding and expression of the topic. Most participants who are invited to take part in a translation workshop have not translated information into their own language before. They usually come lacking confidence and skills, not expecting to be able to contribute. However, the workshop process carefully builds up their skills and confidence. One of the first activities is usually a debate, which helps participants to think about why they are doing this work. Why is it important to share information in their own language? They are given time to prepare their case. The debate is always great fun, but it carries a powerful and significant message too. During the workshop, participants always work together in small groups. This means they can discuss the meaning of the passage they are translating first and share alternative words and phrases. Participants try out translation using a sample passage. This shows how people can translate the same material in very different ways. What's more, most languages are in a process of change, so the group will need to agree how modern the version should be. Will they include words from other languages regularly in use? Will they need to choose a particular dialect? Before the workshop, the organizing group will have thought about which guide will be most relevant and useful to local people. Small groups of participants work together on sections of the Pillars Guide. The great thing about the guides is that they are made up of different sections. Each section makes sense on its own. This means that groups can work away on different sections or Bible studies so that the whole book quickly comes together. Groups can check and comment on each other's translations, making useful suggestions. As the workshop progresses, 2 or 3 participants are taken out of the groups to form an editorial committee. They check all the translations for consistency and accuracy. It's great to arrange for people to start typing up the work once the editorial committee have checked it. As well as checking the translations, it's also really important to check the illustrations too. Tearfund usually produce at least 2 sets of illustrations, one for African readers and one for Asian readers. Sometimes there are also Latin American illustrations too. You can find the alternative illustrations on the CD-ROM. You could also find a local artist and produce your own illustrations so that they are appropriate for the local situation. Make sure you find a good artist who will be able to understand the more practical diagrams and copy these accurately. UC Selma in Brazil was invited to help contextualize 2 Portuguese guides. She studied the guides and produced new illustrations. She admits that she ended up falling in love with the Pillar's methodology. She saw Pillar's guides being used at Casa Philadelphia and offered to help as a facilitator. She sees Pillars being put into practice there, with people sharing their knowledge, experiences, and valuing their culture. Because it's so important to make sure the translations are accurate and clear, several checks are made. One check is done after typing up the translation. If possible, the finished guide is then tested with some typical groups to get their comments and feedback. Then a final review is made by 1 or 2 people with particular skills in the language and the subject matter. All these checks and reviews help make sure the final version is really accurate and clear. It is very expensive to make changes once the guide has been finalized and printed. Printing translations is the final stage. Once a translation is completed and carefully checked, the text can simply be dropped into the appropriate page design file provided on the Pillar's CD-ROM by a designer or by someone with understanding of the software we use. When a good copy is produced, organizations may decide to make photocopies and bind them before distributing to local groups. However, if funding is available, it is advisable to print copies. These will look better, be stronger, and mean that bulk copies can be distributed or sold to other organizations. Tips are included in the Pillars workbook to help organizations through the stages of using a printing company, which can seem daunting if people have not used them before. How many books should you have printed, for example? It may seem extravagant to print 1,000, but actually in most cases, printing less doesn't save any money. The Pillars workbook gives practical advice on how to get good quality printing at a good price. There are already a wide range of translations of guides, and the number is growing all the time, helping to increase the number of groups who can make good use of them in taking action in their communities. We know of over 80 language translations of Pillars guides around the world. These range from major languages like Portuguese, Hindi, and Chinese to a very small language groups like Kinyarwandan, Zande, and more.